Good evening and welcome. The August 20th Board of Commissioners meeting is now in session. Mr. Michael Williams has come to give us the invocation and pledge allegiance. If you could all rise.
Let us pray. Loving God, we give you thanks for this board of members here that help guide and direct this county in directions. And Lord, we just ask and we hope and pray that those directions are under ultimately your guidance. Where there's people who are hungry and in need, Lord, let this body help those that are in need. Where we can make decisions to further this community in a good and prosperous way, let that happen here. Be with the members and the body as discussions are had tonight, Lord, that we come out with peaceful resolutions and that everybody is in one accord as we walk from this building tonight. For it's in your Son's holy name, Jesus, that we pray. Amen.
Amen.
At this time, let's pledge our allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. Reverend Williams, thank you, sir. Appreciate those kind words. Take care. Don't rush off. Moving on, approval of the agenda.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to make an amendment to the agenda. Under new business, I'd like to add item number 2, Senior Citizens Advisory Board appointments. With that, make a motion for approval.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor? Hold on.
Mr. Chairman, I'd also like to add, I guess, you said yours was number 2. I have an appointment to the Veterans Board.
That's under
The
1.
veterans, number 1.
It's on there.
Veterans on there.
Second page. There we go.
There it is.
Any-
You did.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. Moving on to public comment. Currently do not have anyone signed up for public comment. Is there anyone that would like to speak to public comment this evening? Going once. Okay, with that I will close the public comment section. And I will move on to commissioner comments, commissioner's report. I will start, if I may, this evening. As you know, we still have a few lingering issues from the rainfalls from previous weeks. And I know someone else is going to speak to this, but Eric and his crew, Will, have just really gone out of their way and just done an amazing job for this county. And the citizens as well. The citizens reporting things, really helping us out during these times is what's important. We can't do it all ourselves. It takes the whole community to get through troubled times. So with that, I really appreciate all the citizens out there and all the staff really coming forward and helping us out. So thank you for that. One other thing I have is if you haven't participated in any of the 350th celebration activities, please try to do so. It's great fun. It's educational. The history of Currituck is rich, as you all know, and it's a great opportunity. So if you have a minute or a day to participate, that would be great. Thank you. And I'll move that to Mr. Beaumont.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The only thing I would like to mention this evening is a letter of appreciation, and I just checked, and it did not get routed to the rest of the board. I'll make sure that happens following tonight's meeting. And it was about the care that a gentleman's brother received in the Outer Banks. Specifically, he's a 20-plus year veteran of emergency medical services, and without knowing anything, his brother wound up as I guess he was body surfing or boogie boarding and took a really bad fall to the point where it was a concussion and a potential spinal injury. And the comments that the gentleman made, first of all, he said the crew that responded And I'll quote those. That specifically, that was Jeffrey Gerhardt, Brian Eagle, Joel Parks, Bernard Joyce, and Robert Pervier, and Chet Fleming was the lead. That the way that they behaved and performed and exhibited state-of-the-art knowledge, not only on the appropriate medical care to the event. He just came away, and he is the medical lead in Burke County for their emergency medical services. So he just had nothing but outstanding things to say to those guys who did everything exhibiting thorough professionalism and nothing to say but positive things. So a shout out to those guys as well as the rest of our EMTs. We've had multiple saves due this year specifically to the actions that this board took. And so, but kudos to those guys. That's it.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Etheridge?
Yes, sir. I'd like to congratulate the Currituck County 4-H members who attended the State 4-H Congress in Raleigh last month. There were over 500 youth and adults leaders there, and Currituck County brought home 10 medals, so I think congratulations goes out to our youth here in the county.
Thank you. Commissioner Hall?
I'd like to take this opportunity. Several years ago, when I first came on the board, one of the things we looked at with the planning staff and the commissioners and other departments here in Currituck was structures that were in terrible shape, some that were falling apart, some that should have been condemned, some that could be rehabbed. Well, we went through those, and I believe we fixed 43. 3 were still being worked on, and we tore down 43. 4 were being worked on, and 3 were just something we couldn't do with. But the thing is, we made Currituck look a lot better. And this was just on the 168, 158 corridor. I think we need to revisit that. Time has come again that there are enough structures that we can either rehab, tear down, or do something with, or even find out if they belong on the historical site. So I would ask that my fellow commissioners, that we look at that and look whether it's 25 or 50. The time is to do it again and get it started now. So I ask you to think about that. I sent out an email. I just think we need to work on that because we need to keep this area looking better, promoting it for businesses, for homes, and if it needs to be done something with, people aren't doing it. So let's kind of help them along the way. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hall. Commissioner White?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Following up with Commissioner Beaumont, once every so often we get good news emails. They're not all bad. This one actually has good news written on top of it. So, and the chairman mentioned it, and so we got an email this week about Eric Weatherly and Will Creef. I know Eric loves it when we mention his name. To express their thanks. This was from the Ocean Sands Service and Watershed Improvement Advisory Board. And I just wanted to thank those two individuals for their hard work and helping them get through after all the rain and inundation and problems they had over there. So I just want to give you guys a shout out and say thank you. Again, I know you put in a lot of hours, so thank you. That's it for me tonight.
Commissioner Gilbert?
I just want to kind of piggyback on what Commissioner Hall said about the cleaning up the corridor. One of the structures at that time that was anticipated demolishing was one of the Rosenwald schools, which is now on the site of Currituck Barbecue, and he is rehabilitating that school for future. So as we look at those things, that's one of the sites that were saved. Paul Robinson took it upon himself to purchase the Rosenwald School that was slated to be demolished, and now is turning it around. So, again, I'm in agreement that those are good things that are happening. Something else that I want to just address the public with. Each one of our meetings, we talk about advisory boards, and I am struggling with filling some seats on both the planning board and the game commission. So if there is someone who lives in the Moyock Township that is interested on getting on an advisory board, please contact our clerk's office and fill out an application. There's a great opportunity. Many of us read the social media, where the county's not doing anything, the commissioners aren't doing anything. This is your opportunity to serve your community, is get onto an advisory board and do good for it. Each one of us serve on multiple boards, but we need your help. We need your expertise, where your passion is, if it's in whatever capacity. I just want to ask you to reach in to your heart and your mind and think about where you could serve best, and certainly reach out to our clerk if there's an advisory board that you're passionate about. I mean, the stormwater, and everybody's talking about flooding. Yeah, we've got stormwater districts that you can serve on. So please take that into serious consideration to help us help you.
Commissioner Payment.
Thank you. I just want to take a few moments to update the citizens and the public out there regarding the mosquitoes and the reported West Nile virus that's been on the news and on the media out there. And I'm on the executive board of the Albemarle Regional Health, and I've been in touch with our Albemarle Regional Health Director, Battle Betts, and he gave me some information this afternoon as a kind of an update I'd like to share with you out there. First of all, the state entomologist, Dr. Michael S. Boyle, he's with the state public health. He came down this afternoon to visit Currituck County. He was specifically coming to address the areas in question, and he was going to be placing some special traps that only target or specifically target the West Nile virus mosquitoes. He was going to be accompanied by the health director during these visits, and hopefully they can get some results from that. The Gavid trap is being placed and today, and like I said, it'll be helpful in attracting those mosquitoes that carry the West Nile virus. So if there are any out there, we'll be able to capture those. And the Albemarle Regional Health, they purchased numerous resources for the mosquitoes in our area. The abatement spray has been purchased, and one case provided to Currituck County. Briquettes and larvicidal dunks have also been purchased and given to the citizens throughout the county. Right now, it's estimated about 1,200 dunks have been given out in Currituck alone, 600 30-day briquettes, and 600 90-day briquettes. When applied to a water source, these briquettes kill mosquito larvae and treat 100 square feet of surface water. They're non-toxic to wildlife, pets, fish, animals. The product kills mosquito larvae within hours and lasts 30 to 90 days. Additionally, 30-day briquettes are available throughout the county. You can get them, I believe, at the library in Corolla has some, and you can get them at the health department here in the mainland. They're on the way to purchase an estimated 2,400 more of the 90-day briquettes to get them out. And as far as the West Nile virus, currently right now the state of Virginia has those tests. And until the state of Virginia has the results from those tests, they will not release them to the state of North Carolina. If the tests come back negative, then they probably won't report anything back to North Carolina. The only way we would get results, and they're currently monitoring if something comes back positive. Right now, the case is considered probable. Until the tests come back later this week or next week, we should get results from that. But I just wanted to let everyone know that the regional health and it's being looked into and measures are being taken. So I just want to give you a quick update out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Payment. Moving on to administrative reports. Presentation of the Currituck County contract initiation and approval process. We have several folks from staff here. They're going to come up and Mr. Scanlon is going to lead us in that direction.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A lot has been written in the last month and a half about the manner and the method in which Currituck County secures and procures contracts. And we've had a couple inquiries from the community that is just unaware of the extensive process that has been implemented to assure that we are meeting our fiduciary responsibility to the taxpayers of Currituck County. Unfortunately, these articles have led to a lot of speculation, a lot of inferences, and a lot of confusion on how we, again, secure and procure goods and services for the county. So I thought it would be helpful, hopefully educational, hopefully informative, if we took a minute and we walk through a process that the county goes through to secure contracts. Looking at this, there are 6 different individuals and 4 different departments that are part of a process that all have a unique piece that they have to do and sign off before a contract can be executed on behalf of the county. And so what I've asked, if you please will indulge me, is the individuals that all have a part to play are going to come up and speak to specifically what they do and the checks and balances that's inherent in the system to assure that we are again being good stewards of the tax dollars. And Rebecca Gay is with us from our Emergency Management Department. She's actually here for a different item tonight, and so I thought I would take advantage of her being here because the process actually starts at the department head level. Is when a department is looking for to either acquire or procure goods or services, it's incumbent upon them to go out and to identify the sources of the potential purchase. And so the process starts at the department level. So with that, I'm going to ask if Rebecca would come up. The department heads all know this as the infamous green sheet process. We'll show you on the screen why. It's a digital process, but historically it used to be a paper product with a green sheet. So we're going to walk you through, and again, if you hear departments talk about the green sheet process, this is the green sheet process.
All right. Good evening. I am going to walk you through the green sheet from the department's perspective. So we'll start up at the top. Now, this is a contract that's already been submitted, so that's what you're following along with. So you start out at the top. You're able to select the date that the contract is submitted. And then below that, there is a drop-down menu that allows you to select which department you're submitting the contract from. And I'll just make a note here. Any box you see with an asterisk beside it must be filled in order for us to submit the contract. This contract is for the communications department. Moving down, we have the number of originals that you're submitting. We're generally asked to turn in 2 originals. That way the finance office is able to keep one, and then the department is responsible for sending a copy back to the vendor. Below that is the scope of work. In this case, this contract is for maintenance of the VHF simulcast paging system, which is used by our fire and EMS agencies. Below that, you select the type of contract. So the contract can either be with another government agency, it can be a county ICA, which is the independent contractor agreement. This is a template contract that we use, I'd say, the majority of the time. And then below that is an option for none of the above, which is generally when the contractor provides the vendor provides the contract or the agreement. Then below that, you enter in the contract amount. In this case, it's $13,668. And below that, you select the bidding threshold. This is a drop-down box that you can't see, but there are several different types, or several thresholds. There's informal or formal purchase, informal or formal construction project. The contract may be below bidding threshold, which is anything below $5,000. Service contract, in which bids aren't required. In this case, the contract is a service contract, so we don't have to bid it out. Then there's sole source, piggyback, or an information technology contract. All right, so we've selected service contract. And below that, you indicate whether the contract has been signed by the vendor or not. Generally, we submit the contract with vendor signature. And then you enter the contract expiration date. In this case, this is an annual contract, so the The contract goes through June 30th of 2019, which is the end of our fiscal year. Then you have the option to select whether or not the contract requires information technology assistance. In this case, it does not. Or public works assistance. Again, this contract does not require that. And then below that, we have the vendor section. So this is where you enter in the vendor name and the vendor number. That number comes from our financial system called Munis. It's the vendors are assigned a number within that system. Then you enter in the date that the W-9 was signed, as well as the expiration date on the certificate of insurance. And these documents are generally available within Munis, and we print off a copy and submit it with the contract. If, for example, the certificate of insurance is expired, the department is responsible for reaching out to the vendor to obtain a current certificate of insurance. And below that, we have vendor verification, and we check that box to indicate that the vendor is not on the Iran divestment list. If you use the county ICA, there is some language in that contract so that you don't have to submit the Iran divestment. It's included. However, if you're not using an ICA, each time you submit the contract, you have to get a new Iran divestment to submit with the contract. And then below that, we have to ensure that the vendor's name matches on all of the documentation we're sending in. So the vendor's name has to be the same on their W-9, their certificate of insurance. We have to go onto the Secretary of State's corporation search website and ensure that the vendor's name is the same, is registered the same there. And then also make sure that the name is correct on the E-Verify. Then below that, we then go back into Munis and enter a requisition. And once we do that, we're assigned a requisition number, which will then document on the contract before we submit it. So at that point, I would press submit and take the contract, both copies, upstairs with a copy of the W-9, the certificate of insurance, potentially the Iran divestment, and I believe that's it, and take it up to the legal office, and then Sandy takes it from there.
Hello. So when I get a contract, on the top right, I believe you all have copies, it will have a contract number and a requisition number at the top right corner. So what I'll do is I'll verify that that contract and requisition match the green sheet that has been provided to me online. Next, I would move to the submitting department. In this regard, it would be communications, and the number of originals, which would be 2 or 3. Some people submit 2, and some people submit 3, so the third copy just goes right back to the vendor. Under the type of contract is original, which Rebecca had chosen for this. There's also a contract amendment, so you can use a prior contract and do an amendment, which would then pop up another screen for what amendment number it is, your original PO number, and different things like that, just to refer it back to the original contract. There's also an advertising button for the type of contract and a grant or license agreement, which we use for any type of incoming money to the county. When you select those, it does provide different pop-up boxes. So if you have incoming money, you don't have to provide the W-9 or certificate of insurance because it's money coming into the county. So next, I match the scope of work with what is on the ICA or the type of contract that was submitted, just making sure that they do match up and it shows the location for where the work is being done. So if this is being in communications, we want to say that this is for the 911 center and if it's a specific tower or not. And also, if any attachments are provided or noted in the scope, then I have to make sure that those are there in order for Ike to review. So then we move down to the type of contract, or is it what type of contract it is, another government agency, county ICA, or none of the above. And That's generally, if it comes in under our system or our contract, it's the county ICA. This one, because Gately provided it, Rebecca selected none of the above. So then we move to contract amount, and I verify that the amount on the green sheet matches what is on the contract. So I will add, subtract, make sure that all their numbers are correct. Next, we go to the bidding threshold. This was a service contract, so the bids were not required. But as Rebecca said, there is also purchase formal and informal, construction formal and informal, below bidding threshold, sole source, piggyback, and IT contract. So they have to select the correct one for whatever type of contract that they are submitting. And then the vendor signed the contract. I will verify on the back page that the person, whoever is authorized to sign for that company, has signed the contract. If they haven't, there is a button when you select no that they can submit an electronic signature, so that will pop up and you can just hit yes for electronically signed. So the expiration date, again, I verify with the contract and the green sheet that they both match up. The IT and Public Works, generally if somebody needs those, this green sheet automatically routes an email to IT or Public Works saying your assistance is going to be needed. So I just look to see if they have clicked a button. And as Rebecca said, every time there's an asterisk, you have to fill it in, and basically everyone has an asterisk, so you have to fill in every single portion of this. So once you move on to the vendor section, the vendor name is the most important because it has to match exactly what the Secretary of State has. So if it is Gately Communications Company, everything on the contract to the W-9 to the Secretary of State to the Certificate of Insurance should carry that name. So if it doesn't, it gets denied. It will get sent back to the submitting department, and they would have to correct the mistakes. The vendor number, again, is something that Munis will generate once they provide a W-9. Finance will go in and give them a vendor number. And again, the vendor number comes from the W-9, so whatever day they submit the W-9 is the verification date that we look for on the green sheet. Anytime for the general liability or workers' comp, I verify the dates are correct. We don't accept NA unless it is not work being done on county property. So if it's a billboard and they're doing it on their own property, we don't need that. But they do have to have an additional insured box checked because that covers the county, and we also have to be listed as a certificate holder for that one COI that's submitted with the contract. The vendor verification, this has changed because this is an older contract. We no longer have the Iran divestment, so it goes for the Israel. So that has been taken out, that part has been changed. And the vendor name matches. Again, you look here to see the W-9, the Certificate of Insurance, Secretary of State, and E-Verify all have the exact name that is listed on the Secretary of State. So the E-Verify, it will show you there only if the bidding threshold is construction formal of over $500,000. The requisition, I verify, again, from the top right of the contract, just to verify that everything comes in correctly. So 95% of the time, if a contract gets denied, it gets denied with me, because before it gets to Ike, we have to make sure that everything is 100% correct on here for him to review. So then he's not coming back to me and I'm going back to them. So once that is all done and I get everything in line, I submit it to Ike.
And then my inbox fills with notices that I have contracts to review, and I do see every contract. Let me step back a little bit. This process started about a decade ago when it came to a point where we were getting contracts submitted to us by the vendors or the contractors on their form. And of course, their form is drafted in a way that benefits them, not the county. It protects them, not the county. And so we developed for the ICA, the independent contractor agreement, which was a model agreement that all county agencies and departments were going to be able to utilize for the vast majority of their contracting services, that would have standardized language in it of all the things that the county would want to make sure appeared in a contract, but written in a manner that protects the county's interest and ultimately the taxpayer's interest, not the vendor. And so now it's become a computerized process, but still it's necessary for me when it gets in my lap to look at each contract, and the types of things that I'm looking for have already been included in the independent contractor agreement model format. But the one you have before you tonight is one of the instances in which we have accepted a vendor's agreement with some modification. But I'm still kind of looking for these same things, and just so you know what's in the independent contractor agreement that the county typically utilizes and that we developed. We're first looking for the service or product that's to be provided to the county, and there's a space in our format for the department then to be able to describe with particular or specific enough so someone knowing or reading it can understand what it is that the county is getting in return for the amount of money that also, of course, is included in the contract. There is provided within the contract, of course, a time for the contractor to perform their services and complete them. And within that, there's also a provision that the county may at any time, for any reason, terminate a contract with 30 days' notice. And we have used that provision a number of times in order to get the county out of contracts where we find a vendor is not, or contractor is not doing an adequate work that was expected, or they're not performing at all. But that lets us get out of a contract quickly, easily, and move on to someone else if we need to provide the service that's needed by the department. We're looking, as you heard a little bit about insurance. We have a requirement now in our contract that each party that's contracting with the county must maintain general liability insurance of certain amounts. They must name the county as an additional named insured entity that's shown on a certificate of insurance provided by their insurance company. Not that they are a holder of insurance, but that actually the county has been added to their policy as an additional named insured party to add additional protection to the county should the contractor do something that causes injury to another or to another's property. We require them to have workers' compensation coverage and provide evidence of that so that if one of their employees is injured or hurt, the cost of that workers' compensation coverage or injury does not come back onto the county. And there's a provision in our standard contract that if they are required by state law to have workers' compensation coverage and they do not, that they will be liable to reimburse the county for any chargeback by workers' compensation for injury to their employee. We also have provisions in our standard contract that requires them to indemnify and hold the county harmless for many of their negligent acts, an additional protection for the county, which is typically not found in the vendor's agreement. Another thing that we're looking for is to make sure that there's not what's called a non-substitution clause. Sometimes vendors, and particularly in their own contracts, will try to slide into the contract or do place in their contract language that says that if the county should terminate the contract for any reason, it may not and will not go get the service from another vendor. Well, that, of course, is unlawful in North Carolina for a county or city to enter into that kind of contractual language in any event. But we go ahead and make sure that it's not in any contract that we're entering into just to avoid the whole problem. We also want to be careful, and we look for carefully at automatic renewals. That's one of the regular comments that there's a place for me to place on this sheet when I do my review process to add comments. Many times I'm adding a comment to the department and to Dan, because he's after me, to give a heads up. This contract has an automatic renewal clause for another term of 1, 2, 3, 5 years. Does the department understand, recognize that, and is that what they want? So we're looking for that. We have a dispute resolution clause. More often than not, vendors will include in their contracts that if there's a dispute between the parties, the resolution will occur with arbitration, which is fine, but they always want to provide that is under the rules of the American Arbitration Association, which is not to the benefit of the county, either in time, money, the amount that would cost to go through a AAA kind of arbitration proceeding, or outcome typically. So we have in our contract that the method for dispute resolution will be arbitration pursuant to the North Carolina Arbitration Act, the same process that we went through recently with Coastland Corporation. While it took a week and many more months ahead of that to get arbitration underway, overall, we've saved probably money and time going through that process. We're also looking for the venue. Where's the dispute resolution going to take place? Many contractors want to provide that the venue for determining or resolving the dispute will be in their locale. Well, we're contracting with companies from Texas. I don't think you want to be sending me down to Texas to defend the county. So we make a provision that the venue for any dispute resolution will be here in North Carolina and Currituck County. So after I've gone through all that and made sure that there is what's called a pre-audit certificate provided for Sandra, which you'll hear from her in a minute, to sign as finance officer, which many times I do have to note on my comments as well, because sometimes these standardized these contracts from vendors don't have that language that's required for a valid contract. I then hit a button and send it on to Dan, who gets the same pile of emails in his inbox as well. There are times, as you heard from Sandy, well, I will also be looking at the amount of money that the contract calls for to be paid for. If it's a service, it does require bidding, as you already heard stated, so I'm not worried about that. But if a department is buying equipment or some tangible object, then I want to look at the amount they're paying for that and determine, although they may have said that they didn't have to go through the bid process, I want to see for myself whether it rises to the level required an informal bid or the formal bid process. If it's an informal bid, we can go through our process as being described tonight without the Board of Commissioners having to consider and act upon it. If it's a formal bid, only the Board of Commissioners can approve a contract that requires a formal bid, and you may thereafter then designate, typically the county manager, to execute the contract on behalf of the county. But you must see a contract that's within the formal bid range. So I'll go back to Sandy if I can't tell and ask her to go back to the department to make sure, did you go through the informal bid process? Did you call 2 or 3 vendors and make a record of quotes that you received from that telephone call? If it's a formal bid process and they didn't do it, then we stop everything. They have to go all the way back to the beginning and do the formal bid process in the statutorily required manner, and then we can start it all again. Typically, though, I think we bring the contracts in a formal process to you first to approve, and then those contracts go back through the same process you're hearing tonight. So it is a very active and involved program, and we're almost to the point of having a contract signed, as Dan will explain to you what he does next.
If I can, one quick question. Can you give me an example of what would constitute a formal bid process and what would constitute an informal?
Yes, for equipment, apparatus, supplies, the formal process is anything over $90,000 is required to be followed. That means we have to advertise in a newspaper. We have actually receive bids. We have a bid opening. The bid then is awarded. You see those at times when award recommendation is made to this board. You always see typically the construction contracts, which requires a formal bid process for over $500,000 and above. That comes to you, but anything under $500,000 that involves construction from $30,000 to $500,000, then the county departments have the ability to handle that in an informal bid process. For the apparatuses of supplies and equipment, the informal process is $30,000 to $90,000, and so in that range, the departments can do the informal bid process without having to come back to this board for approval of the contract.
Thank you.
You guys, if memory is you guys frequently ask for more of a formal bid process, even though it's a lesser amount. Don't you usually go out and get a couple bids on something instead of going through? It seems like we've had a couple of things that came through just as a matter of getting the best bang for your buck, basically.
Well, all departments are always encouraged to shop around.
Right.
And so even with a service contract that doesn't require a bidding process, informal or formal, the department heads are encouraged and expected to have at least called a couple different folks that provide the service, because we want you to get the lowest responsible price for the benefit of the taxpayer's money.
When I get submitted, it comes to me, like he's mentioned, I get an email first that tells me that the contract's on its way. That also serves as the department that originated it at any time can log in and see where in the process their contract is, so they can track along with it. I will make a comment. You heard two things that probably sounded very, I was going to say foreign, but that's probably not the right word. The investment activities in Iran and or the divestments from companies boycotting Israel are two things that we are required by the state of North Carolina to check that the state, I think the secretary or state treasurer maintains a listing under both of those criteria, and it's basically company, I think one of them is companies that deal with energy or oil. But if you're a company that is on that list, local governments are barred from doing business with you, and so we have to document that we've gone and verified that you are not on a barred list. So the contract ends up coming to me. I'm going to double check the vendor, make sure, again, I have the vendor against the right green sheet. I'm looking at the dollar amount that's on the contract. I'm reading the scope of services that's to be performed. I'm looking at that scope to determine whether it is, do I feel like it's proper? Do I think it's appropriate for that department, appropriate for perhaps conversations the Board of Commissioners have had with me, or conversations we've had at the working retreat, or directions that I've given that department to make sure that it's something that we would consider reasonable and appropriate for that department to move forward with. I glance through the green sheet to make sure all the boxes are checked. If they are, then I will go ahead and affix my signature to the contract, and I hit submit, and it goes to Leanne.
That's the slew of emails. My role is basically to attest to the contract. So what that means is I'm signing it as clerk to the board, and I'm affirming or confirming the authenticity of the contract, that it is a county contract. It's usually Dan's signature that comes through. So what I do, I take the contract, I'll just flip through, make sure all the signatures that are supposed to be there are there from the county side of it. I'll sign, I'll emboss with the county seal. I will then pull up the green sheet using the contract number, make sure that the vendor and contract number match the hard copy that's in my hand, and I hit submit. So for me, it's pretty easy. And then it goes on to finance.
Good afternoon. After everybody else has looked at it, then it comes to finance, and we go back through it again, and we check to make sure that there's money available in the budget to cover the contract, at least for the portion of it that is for the current fiscal year. And if it's under a project ordinance, and then it's for the life of the project. But I go through and I put if it's a county contract, it already has the pre-audit certification on it, usually on the front page. If it is not a county one, then we have a stamp and then we can put it on there. But that says this instrument has been pre-audited in the manner required by the Local Government Budget and Fiscal Control Act. And basically that means that we have checked to make sure that there is an appropriation for the contract, and that the money that's expected to be there will still be there at the end of the year. We convert the requisition that was requested into a formal purchase order, and then at that point we scan the contract into our Laserfish system, where anybody can go and pull it up and look at it, anybody within the county. And then we hit submit, and it goes back to the department head, and they can see that it is on its way back.
And then I get a copy of the contract back, and I'm responsible for sending that off to the vendor, and I also provide them with the purchase order, and then we are able to execute the contract.
So hopefully the board and the general public, it is a deliberate process that has numerous checks and balances against it. Some might say it's an arduous process. Folks who contract with us are hearing what we do on our side now and understand sometimes why it might take as long as it does to get a contract through. But as I was told a long time ago, you know, when you're spending public funds, perhaps speed is not necessarily the best thing to do. If the departments and the vendor have all of their documentation correct in the very beginning, this can take a matter of just a couple of days to get a contract through. It's possible to get through one on the day it's submitted. On average, it probably takes 4 to 6 days to get through. Every contract, every agreement goes through this process that the county receives. When I was discussing my part, I'm the one who ends up putting the signature on the contract. But I get that authority because the Board of Commissioners have delegated me that authority. As a starting point, there's only one entity that has the ability to obligate Currituck County for any fashion, and that's the Board of Commissioners sitting as the Board of Commissioners. Hopefully you can imagine how slow and inefficient government would be if every document had to come in front of the board every 2 weeks, or perhaps sometimes you have a 3-week break before we could conduct our business. And so because of that, the board in the budget ordinance has given certain authorities to the county manager and the county attorney. I will tell you there's 5 of them. There's nothing unique about these. I'm willing to bet if you looked at 100 county budget ordinances, the vast majority will have this exact, almost verbatim language. So there's nothing unique that we do in this aspect. But there's only 5 conditions that a contract or an agreement can fall under that authorizes me or the county attorney to execute that. The first one being, we talked briefly about formal and informal bids, and this is talking about construction contracts. Construction contracts that do not require the formal bids, that they're under $500,000. I have the authority to sign those contracts. If it's over that, it has to come to the Board of Commissioners. The next one is when we buy things, apparatus, supplies, materials, and equipment. If it is $90,000, if it's in the formal bid for things, I have the ability to execute that contract. The next one is things that are not in the formal bid. Again, things, supplies, materials, apparatus. As long as the Board of Commissioners have appropriated money into that department, I can execute that contract. Leases of personal property that are for 1 year or less, and money has been put in the budget, I can execute that contract. Services, as you mentioned, as you probably have heard from the staff, says services are not required to be bid out, so I can approve a service contract, but again, only if money has been put into the line item to support that. The next one is I have the authority to execute grant agreements as long as the funds have been put into the budget department, and or as long as the agency giving the money is not requesting specifically that the Board of Commissioners act on that agreement. And the last thing is I do have the ability as either the lessor or lessee of real property as long as the terms of that agreement are 1 year or less, and yet again the funds must need to be in that line item. So the board, through the budgetary process, appropriates the money, makes the money available to department levels, and as long as the contracted agreement meets one of those 5 criteria, I have the authority to execute that on behalf of the county. If it does not meet one of those criteria, then it comes back to the Board of Commissioners. These are specifically delegated to me by the Board of Commissioners. Y'all have the ability to add, to change, to modify in any fashion that you see fit. There is, as you have noticed already before, there is some statutory requirements that will force a contract to come back to the Board of Commissioners. We have seen that executed, or we've seen that process done here with this board, and it speaks to when one of the Board of Commissioners wants to contract back with the county, it specifically lays out a process that has to go through, and that is a public process that goes back to the Board of Commissioners.
So, okay, the process by which a contract travels its way upstream is very sophisticated and has come a long way in the last several years. One thing that that's not been addressed is how the determination is, well, basically it comes down to how a contract is awarded to an entity. There's two basic types of contracts or efforts that the county receives. And of course, you can correct me if I'm wrong. One of them is the county has a need, that need goes out, and then suppliers and vendors provide, solutions to that need. The second one is what in the government world we call a unsolicited proposal, which is someone comes in off the street and presents, here's something I think the county could use. The differences between the two typically are in a need that is demonstrated or is spoken about or communicated through the county already understands what they're looking for, and therefore, companies respond to that. In the unsolicited response, what criteria are used to award a contract to an entity that comes before that presents it to the county? For example,
sure.
If it doesn't fall under what exists as a need, what process is used to determine whether or not that is a valid need?
Absolutely. Generally that, well, I guess it could come into the county in multiple different ways. There are vendors that will call my office and just, I would say, randomly solicit. Sometimes when Board of Commissioners go to workshops, retreats, conferences, there's always a vendor section, and someone might come up to a commissioner, and commissioners do and have given them my number, and the vendor will call me, or they will go directly into that department. The vast majority, if not all the time, I pass that information down to the respective department that would be responsible for whatever goods or services that this person is presenting, to give them the opportunity to assess whether this is something that has value to that department. Perhaps we're using a different vendor, and the vendor soliciting is going to bring either a better quality or better price. Perhaps it's a service we do not have that by suggesting this service we increase efficiencies, or there's some cost savings associated with it. But those would go into the department level, and the department would have to do an assessment and evaluate. If they feel like there's a legitimate need or efficiencies associated with it, then they would start this process, and it would fall into what you just heard.
As we vet organizations that do that, how do we, because again, typically it's based on past performance or a historical record of the entity doing that type of work. Again, is that something that you're relying on your department managers to do, or if they come forward with, here's something that I want to get, what or purchase or acquire, what vetting or what supervisory role do you play in actually looking at that and going, okay, evaluating their past performance where they've done it in the past before? How and I'll give you an example. It's not uncommon for a solicitation in the DoD space where your technical approach, here's how I'm going to do this job, is rated at one number. Your past performance is rated at another number, and then the type of people and the labor categories they're using is another number. All of that rolls into what it comes down to an award.
Well, I can give you an actual example. A commissioner attended a conference recently and somehow came into conversation with the vendor. The vendors reached out to me. They have ironic enough, some type of a digital online purchasing package that they sell. So they call and they have their pitch. It's a national company. So I asked them if they could submit to me a list of vendors that, specifically North Carolina counties that use this service, to give me the opportunity to reference against North Carolina counties, especially if it's one that's Northeast North Carolina. The managers meet, we talk. I can ask if anybody else has seen or heard about this. So I'm going to vet out a reference list, but I also take that and I send it back into the department that is responsible for purchasing acquisitions, for purchase orders, and to see if they felt like this was anything worth pursuing or whether there's added value to the county for having that service. But, I mean, we do vet them. I mean, we're going to look at, depending on what the service is or what they do, whether it's getting references to see are people happy with the past performance. We're going to talk to folks to determine whether the price is comparable. Certainly, we encourage and require our boards, our departments, if it's over $5,000 and it's not a service, they generally are required to contact at least 3 vendors to get a price to determine whether this price is in the market. So we have, depending on what the service is or what the good is, we have different things that we do to bench it.
How do we qual QA if there's no past performance? What do we use to mitigate that as a risk? Because at the end of the day, we're managing risk, right? We're managing the risk to the county, and so what do we do to mitigate that risk?
I think part of it's mitigating risk, but that's not the entire part of the process. I mean, you're also either acquiring something of value or you are providing a service. Certainly going to look to make sure that the service is appropriate and proper. Do we feel like we're getting the value out of the service that's being asked for the price that's being asked? I don't think mitigating risk is a part of it, but not the sole portion of evaluating a contract.
That's the other reason why, of course, we've already entered into a contract by that time, but that's why we have a provision that for any reason, the county may terminate a contract with 30 days' notice. And we've done that when we've had vendors, as I said earlier, we've had vendors who are not performing as expected, and so we end up terminating those agreements under that clause and seek another vendor that can provide the service as expected.
But typically those are incrementally funded, and I'll use grass cutting, for example. You know, you have a vendor that's not cutting the grass appropriately, it needs to be done. I could see where that contract could get terminated and then someone else being brought in, correct? But we're not paying him to do a year's worth of lawn cutting ahead of time, right? I mean, there's time for the county to be able to change directions without incurring, continuing to pay the original vendor. That's what I mean by mitigating risk.
Yeah, but very rarely, and I don't want to say we never do it because I'm sure we could find an example, but very rarely do we pay out 100% of the value of the contract without some degree of performance on the party side.
Okay.
Something that I might have misunderstood you wrong. If it's a service contract, you do not have to have insurance or workman's comp, correct?
No, that's not correct. We do not have to bid service contracts.
Okay, but you still have to have insurance?
We do require them in most every instance that they have liability insurance and workers' compensation insurance if required by state law.
Okay.
I think the comment was made if it's a service contract and they're not performing it on county property, we do not require a certificate of insurance workers' compensation for that because they're not on our property.
Or general liability because they're performing the service off county property elsewhere.
And I would comment that when we make the statement about the informal versus formal, the bid thresholds, the fact that service contracts don't have to bid, all of that is in general statutes of the state of North Carolina. That is not something that Currituck County has decided, but these limits are in the statutes, they're in the law. Service contracts don't have to bid. That's a statute, and so that's inherited into our process.
Mr. Scanlon, staff, thank you very much for that very thorough presentation. For the record, I asked for a 5 to 7 minute presentation. Just to let y'all know that out there. Sometimes staff doesn't listen, so, but no. But yeah, thank you very much. We appreciate that. And with that, obviously there's been some issues with a previously let contract. And Ms. Etheridge at our last meeting so eloquently put out there that, sometimes we need to make changes to ordinances. And I think we as a board are very proactive in that, and we have shown that over the last 18 months. And, it's come to everyone's realization that we need to make a change. So I've asked Mr. McCree to write up an ordinance change in the process for which we let our contracts to elected officials. So with that, I'll hand it over to Mr. McCree.
You were provided earlier today a proposed amendment to the budget ordinance. You see budget ordinance amendments often, but it typically deals with numbers as opposed to the verbiage in the budget ordinance. But as the county manager went through with you a moment ago, you have delegated your contracting authority to me and the county manager in certain circumstances. He walked you through those circumstances in which he and I are authorized to execute contracts on behalf of the county. But to address the concern that has been raised, it is proposed that there be added to Section 33 of the budget ordinance a new Section F that would provide that despite the authority that's been granted to the county manager and the county attorney to execute contracts under certain conditions, the county manager and the county attorney may not execute any contract with an elected official who represents the county unless that contract with that elected official representing the county and the amount of the contract comes to this board for approval. And that approval must be, and we set out the statute, but must be in accordance or in the manner as set out by GS 14-234. And that is a statute that you are familiar with. You've used it. For example, in Commissioner Payment, as he is contracted with the county to provide heating and air conditioning services to the county, it authorizes for a county of this size and population with no municipality for a county to contract with a commissioner, an elected official of the county, upon a resolution adopted by the board in open meeting, and there is a requirement that that contract and the payments made over the course of the year be posted for the public to be able to see in the county facilities. And so what this provision will do is require the same type of procedure for an elected official who represents the county. If they intend to contract with the county or desire to, and the county wants to contract with them, it's going to be this board that is going to have to first see that contract, approve it by resolution in open meeting, approve the amount of the contract in that resolution in open meeting, and that contracting elected official representing the county and the amount paid to that official over the course of the contract will be posted publicly. That is proposed for you tonight.
Thank you, Mr. McCree. With that, I will look to the floor for a motion to approve that ordinance change.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to accept the resolution with the addition of item F.
Second.
For discussion, I really feel what this is doing is protecting the staff and protecting the elected official from undue scrutiny, either from the public, from the media, from other elected officials. It's a protection device that we feel it's come to light, and we need to make sure that everyone that's involved with this process is protected. So I think it's a very good ordinance change, and like I said, we're really proactive on all of our ordinances. When things come to our attention, we really do a really good job of making those changes and doing what's right. So that's the only comments I have on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'd like to second the motion.
I'll
We've
beat you
got
to
a
it, Ms.
motion and a second.
But I can rescind my second if you would like to.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. Again, thank you, staff. Well done. Much appreciated. Moving on to public hearings, consideration and action, PB 18-14 Panther Landing, request for a preliminary plat use permit for a 50-lot Type 2 conservation subdivision located at Panther Landing Road, tax map 14, parcel 13B, Mayock Township. With that, I'll hand it over to Ms. LaCicero.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a use permit, so we will need to swear in.
Anyone that would like to speak to this permit, would you please step forward? You place your hand on the Bible, raise your right hand, please. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The case before you tonight is a conservation subdivision for a 67.62 acre tract of land at the corner of Panther Landing and Tulls Creek Road. It is currently zoned single-family mainland, and with the majority of the property surrounding it, single-family mainland, agricultural, AG is in the property across the road. It is designated rural in the land use plan, the 2006 land use plan, and in the Mayock Small area, it is designated limited service. So before you tonight is a 50-lot proposal for a conservation subdivision. The conservation theme is farmland and floodplain preservation. The existing use is cultivated farmland. The required open space for this property is 27.05 acres, and the provided open space is 27.89 acres. The project density is 74 units per acre. All lots are designed to meet the minimum lot size of 30,000 square feet. External interconnectivity is proposed with the connection to the northern property there, and the internal connectivity of the roads, the streets, and sidewalks. There will be public water, and the septic, it will be each lot will be served by septic tanks. For the drainage and stormwater, there will be lot line swells that will feed into roadside ditches and then into the retention ponds here and over here. The landscape, and there will be a farmland buffer along the northern part of the tract. And the majority of the open space is going to be conserved here along Tulls Creek Road. The county does have a convenience center here at the corner of Tulls Creek and Panther Landing. We do have a 1 acre increase, a 1 acre lease for the use permit that was approved last year. And at this time, that lease will continue on with the new owner. So I'm sorry, the applicant is Currituck Homes. I forgot to say that. There is residential development around this area, and of a similar lot size. There would be payment in lieu of dedication. There would be a 1.275 acre dedication for Parks and Recreation, and we will accept the amount of $7,073 for that payment in lieu. Now, many of you were at the earlier work session where we talked about the adequate public facilities and the schools that this type of residential development would generate. So in your packet, you see that you see the breakdown of the number of students that this 50-lot subdivision will generate. It will generate 12.5 students at the elementary school level, 4 students at the middle school level, and 7 students at the high school level. TRC did approve this with conditions that an easement is required for the street stub feature connection with the sidewalk utility infrastructure, and that the developer use alternative lot layout that places sidewalks across the front of the lots, that there would be that the front setback be increased to 20 feet, so the sidewalk easement is not in front of it does not block the driveway. So in the use permit, we have certain standards that we have to meet. We have 4 findings of fact that staff and that each application should meet, and I will go over the 2 findings that the staff is responsible for. And one of the findings is that the use will be in conformity with the land use plan or other officially adopted plans. And staff's preliminary findings is that the 2006 land use plan classifies this site as rural within the Moyock sub-area. The Moyock Small Area Plan classifies this site as limited service with densities between 1 and 1.5 units per acre. This site, this proposed development density is 0.75 units per acre. And the proposed use is in keeping with the policies from both plans, and we've listed out those in your staff report from the land use plan and the Moyock Small Area Plan, several policies within there. Staff also had to make the finding that the use will not exceed the county's ability to provide adequate public facilities, including but not limited to schools, fire and rescue, law enforcement, and other county facilities. Based upon the school numbers that I went over earlier, and this will not, currently Currituck County has adequate public facilities to serve the proposed subdivision. And with that, I will take any questions from the board may have about this project.
Mr. Cicero, on the bottom left of the page there, where does that road go?
Down,
Your other left.
up here.
Bottom left?
Oh, this one is going to, the stub out, it goes into a vacant, a property that's not, right now is not being developed. It's a vacant piece of farmland to the north.
That's up to a ditch.
I'm not sure.
The farmland.
That's the farmland preservation buffer.
Is that put there for future connectivity or something?
Yes, for future connectivity. If the property to the north is to develop, then that would interconnect with this neighborhood.
Fair enough.
And the farmland type buffer, again, can you refresh us on what that is?
I would have to get, I'm not sure myself. I'd have to look that up.
Okay.
Any further questions for Ms. LoCicero? If I could have the applicant come forward, Mr. Bissell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The farmland buffer, to answer that question that proposed is a 50-foot buffer. And actually, in this case, and the ordinance calls for you to have 25 feet of that as undisturbed, and the next 25 feet to have at least 2 rows of trees to be planted.
Okay.
As well as within that buffer, you typically have either a ditch or a fence or something that would discourage
running through the farmer's field.
Residents from running out into farmland, I guess. In this case, it's actually a little bit more than 50 feet because it also power lines in that area.
What it says Jones Farrell Ditch, does that mean it does butt up to a ditch?
Same ditch.
There is a main drain, the road does go to a main drainage ditch then?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Mr. Bissell, if I could, in speaking with Ms. LoCicero earlier, she mentioned something about a culvert size that might be an issue. Can I have Ms. LoCicero speak to that, and maybe you answer that for me?
Yeah, during TRC, we spoke with North Carolina Department of Transportation staff, and that there is an issue with the culvert that goes under Panther Landing Drive that some of this would drain to, and we're going to have to work with the DOT and the developer to see about how to best possibly improve that culvert under Panther Landing, because that is one of the main drainage areas for this subdivision.
They're questioning whether it's big enough.
Correct.
Basically.
And
okay.
yeah,
was that
but
something
it's very difficult to require a developer to make off-site improvements.
Gotcha. Is that something you would be amicable to. How about that word?
Yeah, good
It's
job.
pretty good for me.
It's been a while.
Yeah.
Philip.
We actually did agree. We actually did agree at the TRC meeting that we would do an evaluation of that pipe to find out if it's of adequate size. We also understand, though, that the pipe is just starting to fail, and I think DOT would be responsible for repairing or replacing that pipe in that event, but we will evaluate its capacity as well.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Bissell, where is that located? Where's that?
That pipe is located just north of the expanded green box area where she's showing the area there.
Okay, so
And
it
that's
goes.
off your property, right?
Right, there's an outlet that runs to the north there that is one of the main drainage outlets for it.
And that's not part of your property. The
Now, our property line is on the
okay.
west side of Panther Landing, Panther Landing Drive there.
Mr. Scanlon, if we have a culvert that is a potential issue with DOT and seeing how quickly they've responded to all of the needs that the county has had, shouldn't we have an answer on that? This is a kind of rhetorical question. Should we have an answer on that before we approve a subdivision that seems to me we're headed right to a dead end here? If I can't get the water off of that and this project has to wait for that culvert to get repaired, we may be a year early on discussing this project.
Well,
Certainly prudent.
There are two things that I could say in response to that. Number one is until we do the stormwater analysis and modeling and so forth, we can't tell you if that culvert is an adequate size, and we would be doing that at the next stage as part of the construction drawing and permitting stage.
But didn't you say that it's failing? I don't need a...
It's been reported that it's failing. We haven't evaluated it at this
so we
point.
haven't got it.
And the second thing is that through the development of the subdivision with the stormwater ponds, BMPs that are being proposed, which are actually oversized compared to the 10-year storm that they would be required to manage, will actually be reducing the runoff from the site compared to what it is now. So we actually have an opportunity to improve the situation.
We know that the 10-year floods, and we got a briefing, are occurring almost annually now.
And in addition to that, we've agreed to model the 100-year storm so that we know what we're looking at there in addition to the 10-year.
Thank you for that.
I guess a couple questions. First of all, I want to make sure I get this right. The front area where the convenience center is, that's part of the property that y'all are buying, but just not putting houses on?
Right, and that's one of the reasons for doing the conservation subdivision, so we can leave that entire front area vacant. That provides a buffer to the convenience center, provides expansion space for the county if you need to expand it beyond what you've already negotiated in the lease.
Let's talk on page 16, the map. First time I've ever seen FEMA zone shaded X, FEMA zone AE 5.4 on a map. Maybe I've never noticed it on purpose, but I've never seen that. What exactly is that, and how do we correct that?
Well, the 5.4 is the elevation of the flood insurance study that FEMA has done. See, that is actually the level that water would likely reach based on the 1% annual flood exceedance analysis that they've done. So that becomes your base elevation for determining what your building pad elevation should be and what your first floor elevation should be, which is going to be 18 inches above that.
All right, and based on that, then let's use page 23, item 7, which talks about unsuitable for septic, and then to page 26, which I think you then rebut in a statement. I assume that's just several lots don't meet up with until you put the ditches in and everything else, whether you can build on them or not?
Well, actually, it's my understanding that all 50 of the lots have been determined to be provisionally suitable with the improvements that are being proposed.
Then I'm trying to figure out why so your rebuttal was just saying it didn't matter, it's already, it meets it now?
sorry, I'm not.
If you go to your page, our page 20, so I'll read you your statement. Hold on, let me get this thing, if it'll get the computer to catch up with me. Let's see, your form, all 50 lots were classified as unsuitable for septic system. Please provide verification that the lots will be or may not be classified as previously suitable with noted improvements under the administrative manual.
Right. And that is really just meeting the technical language of the UDO, because the reports say that the lots will be reclassified to provisionally suitable once you fill them and drain them. And the UDO says, we want you to say that they are. And he's saying, well, what he is saying is that they will be reclassified, not that they may be reclassified. That's really the difference in the language.
And I want to skip back to page 9, all the way back there. Hold on, I'm going to get back to that. Sorry about this. You'll have to bear with me because I'm trying to think of the order. There's a section on page 9, and it talks about, make sure I get this right. No, I'm sorry. Hold on. Find it in here. Where it talks about the, oh, here it is, at the top, recreation and park area dedication. Payment in lieu of dedication, 1.275 acres, will be accepted in the amount of $7,000. Now, right now, we have a convenience center there, and we want to expand it. And I think that belongs to y'all. Could that be conveyed to the county instead of, you know, for the 1.25 acres? I'm not sure if you or Mr. McCree or Mr. Scanlon can answer something on that.
Well, we actually did show that area, that 1.25 area of potential dedication adjacent to the convenience center there, but and we had some discussion about it at the TRC meeting. Right. But Ms. LaCicero may be able to elaborate on that. It would be two different departments really that would be.
Our Parks and Rec director did not choose to want that acreage that they had designated, so that's why we took the 7,000 fee in lieu of. And that would be a Mr. McCree question as far as open space versus the recreation dedication versus convenience center.
Whether we take this instead, okay?
Yeah. I don't believe that the county could, that the applicant could meet its requirement for the recreation and park area dedication by conveying it to the county for purposes of a convenience center. Commercial.
Okay. Can we do anything else for open space, such as, is that what this, is this considered open space where the convenience center is?
Yes, the convenience center is considered open space, and it is a county facility, public facility that would be allowed to exist in open space.
Okay.
Well, there's an interesting thing.
It's pretty open.
Right. Except for the metal containers and the oil.
I'm good.
I got a question. I don't know if Ms. LaCicero or whoever, I'm just looking at this map here, and at the bottom of 31, there's a note here about an existing ditch to be evaluated for maintenance and cleaned out if necessary, subject to any required permissions. What do they have to get permission from the other landowners or somebody before they can clean that out, or?
It may be. I'd have to.
I don't know what that was referring to when you mean required permission.
Typically, if your project requires a sedimentation and erosion control permit from the state, and that ditch straddles a property line, the state would like to have that adjacent property owner sign off before you clean out the ditch, because you may. Even though we have proposed, and we've even done it in the past, where we have just cleaned out one side of a ditch and even deepened it on that side and laid it back, the state is not convinced that you can do that without disturbing the other side of the ditch, and you can't disturb the other side of the ditch without.
So are you relying on that ditch then for part of the drainage on this property? Is that going to be part of it?
Part of our next stage is to evaluate those ditches to find out what condition they're in and whether and how much water we need to put in them and what.
So it's possible then you might need to use that ditch and you might have to get permission then to clean it out then, possible, okay.
Does anyone ever say no? Who wouldn't want their ditch?
We had a project.
Who wouldn't want their ditch cleaned out?
Project delayed 4 months.
Really?
On trying to get somebody to say yes.
Why would you
a
not
couple
want your
years
ditch
ago.
cleaned out?
I noticed we have the farmland buffer, but what's in around the convenience site now? Since I don't go over there much, is that just open farmland around the convenience center now? So just grass, basically, or whatever crop is being planted?
It is. There's a tree buffer. The actual convenience center is on the south side of that ditch that runs through it now, and there's a tree buffer there.
A lot of corn and everything else planted.
Okay. Well, what happened? That's my
my
question is, once that agriculture's gone, what's preventing the guy from looking at the convenience site in the neighborhood if there's no buffer there, any kind of a vegetative berm or anything like that? Just right. Well, then it's fields. So when you put a house in there, though, now that homeowner's going to be looking at that convenience site.
There's a nice tree buffer there now.
There is.
Yes.
Okay.
And hopefully the county will replace that when that has to be torn down.
When we expand.
Is there currently space available with the expansion plan on the land we currently have for the convenience site? Or do we need to acquire more land to do that?
We have executed an additional lease agreement for some additional property.
Okay. Any further questions for the applicant?
Well, I came up and started answering
questions,
questions, but I didn't actually present the use permit criteria, which I should do.
We used up all your time earlier with our presentation.
While you're ahead, Mark.
You get nothing. Please go ahead.
I would just like to, Ms. LaCicero ran through 2 of the 4 criteria. I'd like to run through the other 2 for the record. The first one is that the use will not endanger the public health or safety. And we have presented 4 observations, findings here that the stormwater management is going to be provided in accordance with the UDO, and we're actually going to be modeling in excess of the UDO requirement and providing these 2 large stormwater ponds to improve the existing drainage situation. As we already discussed, Albemarle Regional Health Services has evaluated the lots and determined that they will be reclassified to provisionally suitable for wastewater. We talked about the project will be obtaining a permit for sedimentation and erosion control, so we will not be providing causing any off-site sedimentation, and that we are not making a connection to Tulse Creek Road. We are utilizing the real low traffic volume Panther Landing Road as the access for this, and all lots will be accessed from interior streets for traffic safety reasons. Secondly, the use will not injure the value of adjoining and abutting lands and will be in harmony in the area in which it's located. As Ms. LaCicero already stated, the lots are similar size. We have actually taken a look at the values of the lots in Cypress Landing and homes on the adjoining properties, and these numbers are approximate, but they have tax values ranging from approximately $230,000 to $260,000, and the sales records show sales in the past few years ranging from $247,000 to $283,000. The sales target for this new project will be ranging from $279,000 to $259,000 values. So the starter value here will be about $30,000 greater than it was in Cypress Landing. So we offer that in support of the conclusion that it will not injure the value and it will be in harmony with that neighborhood. The land use plan criteria that Ms. LaCicero already went through indicated that the density is appropriate for the location, that open space development is an appropriate style of housing development, that we are providing adequate open space and recreation and multimodal interconnectivity, and and then lastly, that it's compatible with the existing development.
That's an interesting one. I'm looking at Google Maps right now, and the interconnectivity, the lot behind it is just farmland, and then you got the Northwest River. Where's it going to connect to? Even if we develop the neighborhood behind that, just as a.
Well, we don't have an opportunity for connectivity
Right.
to the on the Cypress Landing side.
Mm-hmm.
As that property is developed, and it has a property line ditch that extends all the way down there.
Right. It just seems kind of fruitless. I mean, there's nowhere, even if it's developed to the I guess the north of that property, eventually there's nowhere for a road to
There might
go.
be an opportunity to connect to the other end of Mac Jones Road and loop that around.
No, to the east, I guess. Okay.
Mac Jones is here, and I guess potentially it could loop around and connect back if this develops and this property develops here.
Any questions for the applicant? Thank you, Mr. Bissell.
Mr. Bissell, this is probably a question for the applicant, but in consideration of the recycle center being located on the property, is there any evaluations that's been done that would hinder the cost or price of the homes that you're proposing to build with having that site on the property? Is down the road, is there going to be an issue with us having to remove the recycling center? Of course, we have contracts or agreements in place, but is that hinder, or do you feel that that's going to take away from the development that's being built?
Well, we think that we've provided an adequate buffer. Of course, we would prefer that the county be expanding it in the opposite direction. It is what it is. If we need to provide additional tree buffering or berm or something of that nature, then.
Right. Well, I just I'm fearful that that would take away from the value of the properties. And again, I just wanted to ask that question if that's something that's been considered, because certainly I'm there on a weekly basis to that site. And in the hot summertime, when the wind is blowing, it does, the odor kind of travels. So, Mr. Olds, if you would.
We haven't done any studies. Certainly, we've looked at it. We've thought about it. We're planning, and I had talked to Mark about putting, obviously, a buffer in there, a vegetative buffer, but if we could do some type of berm or hills to help alleviate that. I will say this about the personnel at that site. They do a wonderful job keeping that site as best one can keep a recycling center site looking as best as we can, or they can. They do a good job. So we will be working with that as we move forward.
Well, again, I just wanted to ask that question because I think that needs to be considered. If I was purchasing a home in this wonderful development that you're proposing, I certainly would take that into consideration, that I'm purchasing a home that backs up to a recycling center. So, again,
I'm not sure what we do, but if we built a berm, 10 feet high with 20-foot trees on it, I think that would go a long way to alleviate those concerns. And obviously, whatever we do, we better do it right, because this is a.
Well, I'm just looking out for your interest also.
Thank you very much.
If I could, one last question. Actually, you brought up a good point to me. Right now, we contract with leasing the property from you. The county does.
They lease it from
The landowner. So now, once this is built, we're going to be leasing it from the HOA.
No. Mr. Brumsey, how would that transfer? I would assume you would be leasing it.
Hold on. Mr. Brumsey wasn't sworn in. If you'd like to be sworn in, you're welcome to.
You have a good answer.
Well, I'm assuming he's appearing representing as an attorney, so what he's saying is not to be taken as evidence.
What will happen is there will be a conservation easement on that area, and that will be in favor of the HOA. The lease would still be with the eventual owner of the property, which will be Currituck Homes, is the way that would be structured.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions for the applicant? With that, I'll open the public hearing. I do not have anyone signed up for the public hearing. Does anyone like to speak to this matter? With that, I will close the public hearing, and I'll open the floor for a motion. We could use some Jeopardy music right now, couldn't we?
Mr. Chairman, I do not want to approve or deny it, but I would make a motion that we postpone this. I think that having the county engineer look at that piping and the drainage, that's just something strongly that I feel that needs to be looked at. I don't think that we can get the Department of Transportation in to look at it, but I would think that Mr. Creef and Mr. Mr. Weatherly could look at that prior to our next meeting. I'm really struggling with that part of it because I don't want to put something in place that we're already having some issues with. So I would propose that we postpone this until our next meeting, giving the staff, and I believe Mr. Weatherly is here this evening, if that would give him ample time to look at that.
Was that a motion?
Yes, sir.
Any discussion on that? I'm curious about the culvert, and I agree with you, and I agree with Mr. Beaumont. I don't know that we could deny this or approve it if he's met his criteria. Is that a question for you, Mr. McCree?
Well, I mean, it's ultimately you, the finders of fact, and so you're going to need to be able to find that there is sufficient evidence presented to your satisfaction to meet each of the criteria required for issuance of a conditional use permit.
Okay.
And if you've determined that there has not been sufficient evidence, or there has been no evidence presented to support one of the elements, then you obviously then are unable to make the required finding of fact.
I guess my question is the culvert that isn't on his property something we should approve or base our decision on approving or denying it?
But it's currently part of the drainage of that property, correct?
Well, I would caution you that generally you cannot require someone to make improvements that are not on their property.
Downstream.
That's correct. Or to require of them something that may be impossible. So if an applicant like this one would be required to go upon someone else's property to make improvements, but they can't get on that property because the property owner won't allow it, then that's an unreasonable condition.
And I understand that.
But the property owner is one and the same right now.
No, it isn't.
No, it isn't.
And the reason I bring that up is I had the discussion with Mr. Weatherly a couple weeks ago about that same issue. I lost that fight. I don't lose many, but I lost that fight to Mr. Weatherly. So, are we on a ground that we're not supposed to be on is what I'm asking, just to make sure we don't do something wrong.
So,
but they brought it up.
I'm sorry.
Did they not bring it up? I mean, they proffered that they had a problem with drainage.
It was an understanding that there was an issue with it, and that's why I want to postpone.
It is a rumor. There's no one here giving testimony that there's a problem.
Right.
I understand, Commissioner Hanna, exactly what you're saying,
Just want to make sure we're not doing the wrong
However,
thing is all.
going back where if we, and I understand there's some constraints that are associated with the county, but if we approve a project with a knowing condition that is a hazard, I mean, I don't know that we could deny this based on that, but I think until DOT comes in, it's like a non-conforming condition.
They're going to have to provide a stormwater plan and then do a study after it's approved and presented to us.
That's my point, is even if we determine that culvert is inadequate, we can't deny this permit because that culvert's inadequate.
And
Because it's not on
Mr.
his
Chairman,
property.
the motion that I made was to postpone
Right. I know, I'm just
decision, so
having
it's not.
conversation. We're just talking here.
Yeah.
It's all good. Just making sure we're clear and everybody understands where we're going.
And I think I would like to.
In postponing it, even if we find out something needs to be done to the culvert, we can't technically deny this permit because something needs to be done to the culvert. Is that correct, Mr. McCree?
Well, correct, unless there is evidence that's been presented to you that enables you to make some finding that there is some detrimental impact on the public health or safety.
And that
but
would be my basis.
But you have to determine that there was sufficient competent and substantive evidence presented
Which there isn't.
during the course of the hearing.
Either way,
No,
I haven't heard evidence that says that culvert's not a problem. Likewise, I haven't heard any that it is. So I don't know that 2 weeks is going to make a difference,
But it would answer
but
that question.
it's 2 more weeks.
Right.
And if this gets approved tonight, though, they're going to have to provide the stormwater
Yes.
management plan for us to look at to make sure if that ditch needs to be cleared out, that they have permission. And so before the development can move forward, that would have to be presented anyways. And if there's any problems with drainage or the culvert, we'd have to have, for the project to go forward, we'd have to have some resolution on how that would be fixed.
Well, I would just like to, if we're going to set them up for success, to have that question answered.
Mr. Bissell, did you have something to contribute to that?
Is requesting that you reopen the hearing.
Yeah, because we have a motion.
Well, we have a motion and a second on the floor.
Okay.
Unless you want to withdraw for a moment.
Can we withdraw the motion?
For further discussion?
I will withdraw my motion to hear what Mr. Bissell has to say.
And I'll reopen the hearing.
Hold on, in a second, as we read. Which one?
She's rescinding her second.
Okay.
All right, then reopen. Okay, reopen. Okay.
Okay, Bobby.
Now reopen.
The only comment I wanted to add was that the county engineer actually is the one who asked if we would evaluate that culvert, and we agreed that we would do that as part of the approval.
And I've not heard from the county engineer, so that's my proposal, is that we postpone it for 2 weeks to give him the time to go in and actually look at that.
Prepared tonight.
Mr. Weatherly, are you in the audience
Oh,
this
yeah.
evening?
He's hiding back there.
He does.
We were going to get you up here one way or another if we were going to give you kudos or
Bernie, can you
ask you
grab the Bible there
questions.
for me and get sworn in, please? Raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Weatherly, have you evaluated this culvert that the applicant is referring to?
I have not, but I'll give you some background.
Would ample time be for a couple weeks for you to go out and look at that?
It would, well, I'm going to ask the engineer to evaluate it and make sure it's properly sized. But he can do that. What I'm concerned about is still a DOT problem. And it boils down to, if the engineer says it's undersized, then we're still relying on DOT to improve it. And then are we going to be able to get them to do that in that timely fashion?
That's my concern.
That's exactly what you were talking about.
And so what we have is a potentially safety issue because of the road flooding. And now, I'm sorry. And now we're permitting 50 lots to go in and homes, and it already, in a situation that's already an issue.
Does the road
And I
flood
under-
there? Is there currently flooding issues on that road?
No, there's
And
not.
with your project, you're actually enhancing the drainage?
Yes.
But it's,
That's their line. I hear that all the time.
Okay.
I'm sorry, but they're improving it up to a point. After a 6-inch rain or a 10-year storm, it's all going through that culvert.
Right.
Correct.
And that's the presentation we heard earlier this afternoon.
Okay.
well, and I'm concerned because, like I said, I do come to this property on a weekly basis, and coming off Tulse Creek, turning onto Panther Landing, that little stub out right by the single family is where that culvert is located, and that's the main entrance to get to this development. So I would like to have a better understanding of if there is an issue that we take care of that prior to.
This came from TRC and the DOT man sitting there saying that culvert may be a problem. This came straight from DOT.
Is that in our
Notes.
because it's not tied to this property, so we wouldn't have that. But do you have documentation of that?
He was sitting in the meeting, so
Mr. Chairman, that would be hearsay. You can't consider that statement.
So again, I'll wait till you close the public hearing.
maybe Mr. Old will fix it.
And if there's an issue there, if DOT does it before we move forward, we would fix it. I'm not gonna build a subdivision where there's a question of flooding and take all that liability.
Right. So Mr. Old is on record as if they determine there's an issue, he'll fix it.
And Mr. Chairman, that has to be part of the motion.
I'm just saying, that's what he stated.
Right.
So you can add it to the motion.
As a condition of approval.
Okay, right.
That satisfies mine.
Okay. I'll reopen the floor for a motion. You may be seated. Thank you, guys.
Mr. Chairman, I think we want to make sure that you've closed the evidentiary phase of the hearing.
Thank you. With that, I will close the evidentiary phase, reopen the public hearing. Would anyone like to speak to this issue now? Hearing no one, I'll close the public hearing and open the floor for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, again, I would like to have some further details, so I would like to postpone this decision until our next meeting in 2 weeks.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Can I get a show of hands, please? All in favor? 3 in favor. Nay?
Nay.
Nay. We have 4 nay. Motion fails. Open the floor for another motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move for approval of PB 18-14 Panther Landing as a preliminary plat with the following conditions. Number 1, an easement is required for the street stub feature connected that also includes sidewalk and utility infrastructure improvements. Number 2, should the developer use the alternative typical lot layout that places the sidewalks across the front of the lots instead of the right-of-way, staff recommends that the front setback be increased to 20 feet from the sidewalk easement and not from the property line. And number 3, if either through DOT's determination or engineering's determination that the culvert is in fact undersized and provides a potential hazard, that Mr. Olds, through the development process, any flooding issues of the road will be fixed by the applicant. And then, let's see, use permits review standards. The use will not endanger the public health or safety as long as the potential flooding instance is taken care of. But number 1, stormwater management will be provided in accordance with the current Currituck County Stormwater Manual and the UDO. Number 2, Albemarle Regional Health Services has evaluated each of the 50 lots for suitability for wastewater disposal and has provisionally approved each lot as having been capable of properly treating domestic wastewater with properly filled and drained lots. Number 3, the project is being designed in accordance with NC Department of Energy, Mineral and Land Resources, Sedimentation and Erosion Control Standards, and will therefore minimize erosion and contain siltation on site. Siltation. Number 4, the subdivision's entrance is off of Panther Landing Road, a road with a very low traffic volume, unless it's flooded. For reasons, no access is being provided to Tills Creek Road, and all lots are being accessed from interior streets. B, the use will not injure the value of adjoining or abutting lands and will be in harmony with the land, with the area in which it is located. Land to the west has been developed into single-family homes. Land to the north is farmland. Land to the south is woodland and single-family lots. Land to the east is farmland and woodland. The tract will be developed similarly to the adjacent Cypress Landing subdivision. Period. C, the use will be in conformity with the land use plan or other officially adopted plans. Specifically, the 2006 land use plan classifies this site as rural and within the Moyoc sub area. Number 2, the Moyoc small area plan classifies the site as limited service with densities between 1 and 1.5 units per acre. The proposed development is 0.75. Okay. And finally, number 3, the proposed use is in keeping with the policies of both plans, which include policy HN1, policy HN3, policy AG2, policy TR8, policy PR6. And the Moyoc small area plan policies TR2, S1, S4, and FLU1. And finally, D, the use will not exceed the county's ability to provide adequate public facilities, and that Currituck County has adequate public facilities to serve the proposed subdivision.
Mr. Beaumont, I would ask that you also add to that under number 1 in section A, 2 large stormwater retention ponds will be constructed to manage and retain stormwater in excess of the reference requirements. Specifically, stormwater will be modeled for both the 10-year and 100-year storm events.
I so would add that to the motion.
And Mr. Beaumont, one clarification on your conditions for number 3. I agree with the culvert. Were you proposing that be done prior to the project being done, or just if a condition occurs?
No, prior to the project being
Okay.
Before the project.
Correct.
Before construction.
Correct.
Thank you.
Before final project approval.
Before
Thank you.
construction
That's
begins.
what I wanted to clarify.
Or do
Okay.
you want before final, before the construction project is completed or before they start?
Before the project begins.
Okay.
It needs to be addressed.
Thank
Do
you.
we need clarity on that, Mr. McCree? Are we good?
Done.
You guys get all that?
I understood your motion, and I'm sure your clerk is looking forward to transcribing that into your minutes.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I will second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. That was not easy. Moving on,
Yeah, you said it was gonna be easy.
consideration and action PB 18-19 JX Motorsports request for a use permit to operate an automobile sales business at 4402 Currituck Highway, tax map 70, parcel 95, Crawford Township. If the applicant and Ms. Cicero please come forward to be sworn in. Please raise your right hand. Both of y'all are wrong. Right.
The other right.
Okay, I feel better about myself. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. You may be seated, and I'll hand it over to Ms. Cicero.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The use permit before you tonight is for this automobile sales, and Mr. Williams is asking for low-speed vehicles. We've seen this before, but low-speed vehicles and side-by-sides are considered vehicles And in our UDO, you need a use permit for sales and rentals of vehicles. So the location for this use permit is 4402 Currituck Highway. It is the old Beach Bums location in Barco Coinjock area. It is a commercial building. It is located in the full service area. It is zoned general business, and the parcel size is actually 24.39 acres. The front of it is zoned general business. The rear of it is zoned ag, and it is full service in the 2006 land use plan. So currently, the applicant is Mr. Elliott Williams, and currently he is running a business there for, he's selling dirt bikes, ATVs, and local crafts. And now he would like to be able to sell utility task vehicles, side-by-sides, and low-speed vehicles. And the applicant is not planning to rent or repair the vehicles at this time. The area, the parcel is served by public water. It will be on septic tank. It does have access from Currituck Highway. There is no stormwater or drainage because it's an existing, no new requirements. The lighting will be required to be full cutoff if he improves the lighting, and the landscaping would be a type A buffer required in front of his display areas. That's one reason we have a use permit for automobile sales and rentals, is to make sure that we have adequate display areas and adequate landscaping for any outdoor display of our vehicles. So the Technical Review Committee recommends adoption of this use permit with the following approvals. It complies that a Type A landscaping buffer is required in the front of the display pad. Right now, he is proposing outdoor display along the property lines on both the northern and southern property line areas, and right here along Currituck, street frontage along Currituck Highway. That the vehicle display pad and the two vehicle display areas must be improved with a hard surface material, and the site shall be improved according to this site plan. Another condition is that the vehicle storage shall occur within the enclosed building or be fully screened from site in accordance with the Unified Development Ordinance and revised site plan. No more than 24 vehicles shall be displayed outside for sale at any given time. Since the building was built in mercantile building type, it is not designed to store vehicles with fuel in them, and so they can have only 5 gallons of fuel allowed in the vehicle at the time inside of the building. So those are the Technical Review Committee recommendations. This is a use permit, so we do have to go through the use permit standards and the findings of fact. I'll go over the staff findings of fact, and the applicant can go over his findings of fact. So once again, I get to read to you from the staff report, but the use permit will be in conformity with the land use plan or other officially adopted plans. The 2006 land use plan classifies this as full service within the Barco sub area. The proposed use is in keeping with the policies of the plan, some of which are policy ED1, new and expanding industries and businesses should be especially encouraged in that diversify the local economy, train and utilize a more highly skilled labor force, and 3, are compatible with the environmental quality and natural amenity-based economy in Currituck County. Policy ED4, in addition to the recruitment and expansion of major new industries and the considerable value of small business startups, expansion and spinoff shall also be recognized. The second findings of fact that the staff is responsible for is that the use will not exceed the county's ability to provide adequate public facilities, including but not limited to schools, fire rescue, law enforcement, and other county facilities. The proposed use will have no impact on schools, and the county has the ability to provide the public facilities such as law enforcement and public water to this business. So like I said, this is an existing building, an existing commercial building. He's already running his business there, and now he's asking for the ability to sell and side-by-sides and low-speed vehicles. If you have any questions for me, I'll certainly be glad.
What's the difference between what he's doing right now?
He's selling ATVs, dirt bikes, and local crafts. and this would give them the ability to do the low-speed vehicles and the side-by-sides.
Because
He doesn't have
Selling.
a
a side-by-side vehicle, I thought.
There's two on the property, I thought.
There's two out front on the
Those
road.
are LSVs.
Those are different? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, the low-speed vehicles that are sitting, I'm guessing, I'm sure the applicant speak to it, but I stopped in to check the place out, and what I've seen out there were the low-speed vehicles
Oh,
for
those-
sale. They look like side-by-side.
Okay.
They're basically a side-by-side that you can take on the street. They have blinkers and all that kind of stuff.
Okay, Mr. Motorbike Racer.
Hey,
so
that's
what's
me.
the difference?
And a UTV.
It walks like a duck.
Right.
Yes. Talks like a duck, and it is a duck.
Okay. Any further questions for Ms. LaCicero?
Yeah, Ms.
Okay, never
LaCicero.
mind. I'll ask
Well,
the applicant.
the low-speed vehicles, they're classified as vehicles. You have to have the registration, and you have to have your DMV, sort of
Got it.
DMV license
Got
to
it.
do that. He's not allowed to get that until he gets this use permit, till he get the use permit. We can't sign off on his DMV.
Okay, but I thought I'll ask the applicant.
He's bringing the parcel into compliance.
Yeah, he's bringing the parcel into
Got it.
compliance.
That makes much more sense.
See that whole business.
So we're in violation right now, is what you're saying. Okay.
Ms. LaCicero, on the staff analysis, it's the applicant's requesting automobile sales and rentals.
Well-
Okay, and then it says later on, he's not planning on to do any renting or repairs of vehicles at this time.
Right. That's just in our use permit table. We consider automotive sales and rentals to be the same
Together, okay.
together.
So, okay, so he's not planning on renting anything now? Doesn't look, okay.
That's his plans. He's told us that he just for selling.
Something more you to see on the beach down there.
Any further questions for Ms. LaCicero?
I do. No more than 24 vehicles shall be displayed outside for sale at any given time. I'm just guessing, but it doesn't look like there's room for 24 vehicles or 24 parking spaces. Are we?
Well, he's going to use the outdoor display here along the northern property line and the southern property line, and right here along street frontage on Currituck Highway. With the size of these small side-by-sides and low-speed vehicles, the applicant has told us he can fit 24 vehicles in these three display areas.
Okay.
Because they're smaller than average cars, and the parking would be reserved for customer parking.
And those areas, so he would have to go in an asphalt or concrete, any areas that they're displayed, is that correct?
Yes, he'd have to have hard surface material
Okay.
in display areas.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, if I could have the applicant come forward, Mr. Williams?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Can you just give us a little, tell us what you're trying to do there?
Well, the
Take your time.
low-speed vehicles are currently, we do not know at this point if they're street legal or not. So they would actually be sold as a side-by-side, off-road use only. I am working with the Department of Transportation, Mr. Bateman, at the DMV over in Elizabeth City. So we don't really know for sure yet if they are low-speed vehicles. Some places say they are, some places say they aren't. So I'm in a conversation with Mr. Bateman right now with the DMV. So other than that, I would not actually need this permit that I would need, except through the DMV. It requires me to.
Okay. Any questions for the applicant?
And it won't hold 24 vehicles. What I mean by that would be you probably have more than 2 or 3 outside, and most of the kids' ATVs and dirt bikes are the small vehicles.
I was going to say, it's a nice piece of property, but 24 vehicles is a lot of room.
It's more than I can handle.
Okay, so, and this is one of those questions. How do we prevent somebody that comes in that tries to set up, and this may not, how do we prevent, this is not directed at staff, but is there anything we can do to help somebody that knows what the vehicle is, or is that the onus on the property owner or the business owner to make sure which category his vehicle is before he gets in and gets into trouble with the mean old county?
Well, I was thinking about that. So your
Because
low-speed vehicles, they have an MSO or a title?
They have an MSO, but they're converted to a title when they go to the DMV. Now, I did this for 15 years up in West Virginia. I just moved home from West Virginia back here.
Welcome back.
Right. I grew up at Knott's Island. I want this my family community here.
Right.
And up there, you had an MSO. They would get their buyer's order. We would send all the paperwork to the DMV, and then they would be issued a title and their low-speed vehicle tag. And on the tag, it says LSV, low-speed vehicle, which means they cannot drive it on any road except 35 mile an hour or less. They can cross a 55 mile an hour road, but they can't drive parallel with it.
Whatever. Sorry.
Yes, that's all right.
Well,
but we don't really
it's
know.
up to DMV, I guess. Really, if you give an MSO, right. Well, I had a dirt bike that was reclassified as a dual sport.
Ultra high speed.
You got it. And I had to get my MSO, and it took a lot to get it to be titled and show that. So, in answering your question, I think it's more on DMV. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. To register.
They move pretty fast.
And they're cool.
Yeah, they do.
Well, they'll definitely scoop. So, like you said, they'll do 45 or 50 miles an hour.
They'll do that speed, but then of course that's when the local police departments have to do their.
Right.
That's exactly right.
No one ever did that.
Just because the Corvette will go 180 doesn't mean you have to drive it that fast.
That's right.
I've heard.
Way off topic.
Sorry. Any further questions for the applicant?
Not on your life.
Thank you, Mr. Williams.
Thank you, sir.
With that, I'll open the public hearing. Would anyone like to speak to this issue this evening? Hearing no one, I will close the public hearing, and I will open the floor for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I'm going to move to approve PB 18-19, the JX Motorsports permit with staff recommendations because the applicant has demonstrated the purpose use meets the use permit review standards of the UDO with the suggested conditions from the staff that the vehicle display pad areas must be hard surface material such as asphalt or concrete. Additional landscaping may be required at the vehicle display pad and areas to supplement the Type A buffer. The vehicle storage shall occur within an enclosed building and be fully screened from sight in accordance with the UDO and a revised site plan. No more than 24 vehicles shall be displayed outside the sale or for sale at a given time. The building was not designed to store vehicles with fuel in them. It was mercantile occupancy. No more than 5 gallons of fuel are allowed in a vehicle at a time when inside the building. And the use will not endanger the public health or safety. The use will not injure the value of adjoining or abutting land and will be in harmony with the area it's located. And the use will be in conformity with the land use plan and other officially adopted plans, such as policy ED1 and policy ED4. And the use will not exceed the county's ability to provide adequate public facilities.
I'll second.
Second that motion.
Mr. White seconded it, so we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. Moving on, consideration and action PB 18-16, Outer Banks Beach Buggies. Request for a use permit to operate a low-speed vehicle rental, sales, and service business at 8604 Currituck Highway, tax map 124, parcel 95D, Poplar Branch Township. If the applicant and Ms. LaCicero could please come forward to be sworn in.
Nope, there's no.
In case you have to answer a question.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Thank you. You may be seated. And I'll hand it over to Ms. LaCicero.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Low-speed vehicles are the topic for this evening.
Yes, they are.
Once again, as a use permit for sales rentals of low-speed vehicles. The applicant is Christopher Seward. The physical address of the property is 86 04 Currituck Highway. This is, they're currently in business there. They are beside the building that houses the gun shack. So that's your point of reference, the small house building right there to the south of that. It is currently zoned GB. The surrounding properties are either GB and ag or light industrial. Outer Banks Beach Buggies LLC has requested a use permit for sales, rentals, and service of the low-speed vehicles. They currently rent golf carts, and now they would like to grow their business through rentals and sales and services of low-speed vehicles. Low-speed vehicles, we think that we view them as vehicles because they have to be registered and insured, so we have to go through the use permit process in order for them to be able to sell low-speed vehicles. Let's see. It is served by public water. Sewer is septic. They do have access from Currituck Highway. There will be no new requirements for their stormwater. It's an existing building with an existing business in it, so no new requirements there. And a Type A buffer will be required in the front display areas. It is in the limited service area of the land use plan, the 2006 land use plan, and this is their site plan. They are going to have display pads here in the front, which will be required to have the Type A landscaping buffer along the front. And there are areas here for parking, and any storage would be behind their fence. So the Technical Review Committee recommends approval, adoption of this use permit subject to the following conditions: that the applicant submit a minor site plan application in substantial conformance with the proposed site plan to be reviewed and approved at TRC, install the required Type A basic landscape buffer between the proposed LSV display areas and Currituck Highway, so along the front right here. The proposed vehicle display pad shall be surfaced with concrete, asphalt, or other pavement permanent surfacing material or other than crushed stone. The conditions of approval necessary to ensure the compliance of the review standards for the UDO shall include that LSV shall be displayed or stored on the property on an approved site pad or in improved parking spaces. Light repair and service functions are permitted as an accessory use, provided all repair-related activities take place within the enclosed building. Service work includes replacing tires, installing electric motors, seats, windshield tops, and batteries. This is a use permit, so we have to make the four findings of fact. I will now review staff's findings, those findings of fact that staff's responsible for. That the use will be in conformity with the land use plan or other officially adopted plans. Staff findings: the 2006 land use plan classifies this area as a limited service within the Point Harbor sub-area. The proposed use is in keeping with the policies of the plan, some of which are Policy ED1, new and expanding industries and businesses should be especially encouraged that diversify the local economy, train and utilize a more highly skilled labor force, and are compatible with the environmental quality and natural amenity-based economy of Currituck County. Policy ED4, in addition to the recruitment and expansion of major new industries, the considerable value of small business startups, expansion, and spinoffs shall also be recognized. The second findings that staff is responsible for is that the use will not exceed the county's ability to provide adequate public facilities, including but not limited to schools, fire and rescue, law enforcement, and other county facilities. Our findings: the proposed use, it is a business, is an existing business, and they're looking to expand, so the proposed use will have no impact on schools, and that the county has adequate public facilities such as law enforcement and water to serve this use. And I'll be glad to answer any questions that I can from the board.
Any questions for Ms. LaCicero?
Getting good at this LSV
Okay,
thing.
y'all are scaring me.
Getting good at this LSV thing.
Okay. With that, I'll ask for the applicant to come up. Ms. Seward, if you may. Thank you. Can you just explain to us real briefly what you're trying to do there?
Simply add to what we existing now do, which is golf cart sales, rentals, and repairs, and add to that business rentals, sales of low-speed vehicles.
Okay.
this
question.
property, at our current location.
You said you do repairs? Do you plan on doing continuing to do that, I guess, so,
Yes.
associated with the sales? Okay.
If a driver, I'm assuming the handout that LSV guidelines was your document?
Yes, I think I included the golf cart guidelines, and then LSV is a little bit different since it does have the license plate on it.
Right. But as a point of clarity from the previous case, they can only go across a faster road at a stoplight.
Yes, that's correct.
That
At a
was not
stoplight at intersection.
So for those watching, so my question is, and the renter, is it a DMV? I mean, is it a police event if they drive on a road that they're not supposed to be on? Because I've seen.
They can be ticketed, yes.
Okay.
I mean, you have to treat it just as if you're driving your automobile. And that's what I tell everybody. Even, car seats, booster seats, etc. Any kind of rules of the road, so to speak, in a car, you have to follow it at LSV because it has the plate on it.
What do they, I mean, I guess it doesn't matter, but what do they look like?
A golf cart,
Okay.
honestly.
Got it.
With a license plate
No,
on
it's
it and a
those
VIN
blue
number.
things that the three-wheel.
No,
that's not us.
That's a whole
Anyway,
other.
all right.
Yeah.
That's,
Okay.
So these are essentially golf carts that go 25 miles
legal.
an hour. Right?
By law, they have to go between 20 and 25.
Right.
They can go no faster than 25 miles per hour. Yes, exactly. Duck is a perfect place. And Corolla, some neighborhoods in Corolla are very popular, for these rentals.
They deliver.
We deliver every vehicle.
driving off site.
Oh, no, ma'am.
No.
Mm.
No. Any further questions for the applicant? Thank you, Ms. Seward.
Thank you.
With that, I'll open the public hearing. Would anyone like to speak to this issue? Hearing no one, I will close the public hearing and open the floor for a motion.
Bob, you're not going to jump in on your district?
No, sir. I'm not allowed to do motions.
Really?
There's a moratorium on me.
Okay. I'll move to approve PB 18-6 Outer Banks Beach Buggies use permit with staff recommendations. The applicant shall submit a minor site plan application in substantial conformance with the proposed site plan to be reviewed and approved by TRC. Install required type A basic landscape buffer. The proposed vehicle display pad shall be surfaced with concrete, asphalt, or other permanent surface material other than crushed stone. LSVs shall be displayed or stored on the property on an approved display pad or in approved parking spaces. Light repair and service functions are permitted as an accessory use, provided all repair-related activities take place within the enclosed building. Service work to include replacing tires, installing electric motor seats, windshields, tops, batteries, and troubleshooting. Let's see. The use will not endanger public health or safety. The use will not injure the adjoining or abutting lands and will be in harmony with the area in which it is located. The use is in conformity with the following policies of the 2006 Land Use Plan, specifically Policy ED1 and Policy ED4. And the use will not exceed the county's ability to provide adequate public facilities.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I need 2 minutes.
We'll reconvene at 8:30. Thank you, folks, for accommodating us with that recess. And moving on to new business, consideration of the Currituck County Emergency Operations Plan and Currituck Alert presentation. And I'll hand that over to Mr. Scanlon, if I may.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We actually have our Emergency Management Director, Mary Beth, is going to present the Emergency Operations Plan.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I also have Rebecca Gay with me, and after I'm done presenting this, she's going to talk a little bit about a program we call Currituck Alert. We're here to present the updated Emergency Operations Plan. And Currituck Emergency Operations Plan, it hadn't been updated since 2007, so we figured it was time for some updates, and we incorporated some changes. As we discussed in the work session at the beginning of the month, the emergency operations plan is not just a good thing to have. It's mandated through directives at the federal, state, and local levels. This includes the Stafford Act, the North Carolina Statute 166A, and here locally, our County Code of Ordinance, Chapter 6, Section 31. The Emergency Operations Plan gives us a high-level look at how the county will respond to any disaster and how we'll manage the risks. The Emergency Operations Plan assigns responsibilities. It sets forth lines of authority. It lists organizational relationships and how actions will be coordinated. The Emergency Operations Plan describes how people and property will be protected. It also identifies personnel, equipment, facilities, supplies, and other resources available here in our county. We no longer separate out our response into hurricanes versus tornadoes versus snowstorms, but we've decided to follow the federal and state plans using something called emergency support functions. Excuse me. So basically, when a disaster happens, if it affects a roadway, we pull out our emergency support function that has to do with transportation, and we work from there. If it affects homes and we need to set up shelters, we go to the mass care emergency support function, and so forth. These emergency support functions, as it spells out the responsibilities of a primary organization or individual to carry out specific actions that exceed our routine responsibilities. It also lists that what departments or agencies are in support roles as well. This is not a play-by-play type of manual. This is what departments take back to their area of assignment and create standard operating guidelines or procedures that support their emergency support functions. Although the Emergency Operations Plan update was spearheaded actually by Rebecca, there were 22 county government departments that were asked to review and talk about the plan to be sure we are responding in a coordinated and effective way. And that's about all I have to talk about on that, so I was going to see if you have any questions for me.
I do not have any questions.
All right.
Thank
If
you.
not, I request that the board adopts the Currituck County Emergency Management Plan, or Emergency Operations Plan.
I make that motion as written.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, motion passed unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Rebecca?
much.
Rebecca, did you want to share about the program that you initiated?
Yes.
Well, no, I didn't initiate it, but so I wanted to take a few moments to share some information with you about Currituck Alert, which is our emergency and public information warning system. So essentially, this is a tool for us to reach the public. We currently have approximately 15,000 phone or telephone numbers in the system. Those are extracted from the 911 database. But our goal is really to get folks to sign up so that we can have more ways to reach them. We have about 800 people who have opted in, which means that they've gone in and created an account within the system and provided additional contact information, such as their work phone number or their cell phone number. There are two ways to sign up. You can go on to www.currituckalert.com, and there's a button there for you to register, and you click and create an account. And this allows you to add phone numbers. You can also add locations. So if you had a child that you wanted to be notified if there was an emergency at their school, if you enter that location, and if something happened, you'd get a notification based on that geocoded area. The second way to register is to text your zip code to 888-777, and this will allow you to get any notification that's issued within that zip code. The sort of the downfall there is that we're only able to reach you by issuing a message within that zip code. So we really encourage our citizens to go online and create an account and add as many ways to reach you as we can. Another feature that we have is called a keyword. We've used keywords for the Independence Day celebration and the Heritage Festival. We currently have a keyword in place, and this is a partnership with the Travel and Tourism Office, and the keyword is Safe Corolla, S-A-F-E, Corolla, and that can be texted to 888-777, and that will allow folks to get information on beach hazards, more specifically rip current risk and red flag warnings.
How long has this program been in place?
We have had this product for over 2 years, I believe. So we're at a point now where we really need to push to get people registered.
Any questions? Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. Moving on to board appointments, Veterans Advisory Board.
Mr. Chairman, I have an individual that I'd like to recommend for the Veterans Advisory Board. His name is Aaron Sterling. He lives off of Tulse Creek, 28 near Navy veteran, retired, and is presently serving on board the base as a government contractor, I believe.
I'll second that motion.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. With that, I'll hand it over to Mr. McCree. I'm sorry.
We have a number 2 senior citizens.
Oh, I apologize. Well, I wanted to finish up with the, we have to set the terms on this. For the Veterans Advisory Board.
As a point of clarification, was Commissioner Beaumont the commissioner appointed to this?
We did not select one.
We haven't appointed a
not done
commissioner.
Okay.
There's no way. And I'm going to let a Navy man.
Wait a minute.
I'm going to let it, hey, yeah. Right.
But he's also an arborist.
All right, an arborist.
Before we move on, I want to go ahead and set our term limits for the Veterans Advisory Board. Is there a particular way that we handle this, or do we go 1, 2, 3 down the line?
Well, whatever way you want. The ordinance that created the Veterans Advisory Board, and this is a way that we typically deal with staggering terms on new boards as they're created. This ordinance provides that 3 appointees shall serve a term of 1 year, and 4 shall serve a term of 2 years. Thereafter, members shall serve a term of 2 years. This initial term for these persons, as they're being staggered, does not affect their ability to serve 2 full subsequent terms. But it's up to you how you want to decide which 3 will serve 1 year term initially and which 4 will serve a 2 year term initially.
I would recommend odd numbers 1 year and even numbers 2 years, however they came in. Is that fair for everybody?
Yes.
That's fine, because they're going to be able to.
Yeah.
They're going to do their thing either way.
Full term anyway.
It'd be appropriate to make a motion to that effect so the
Okay.
clerk
Can
can then
someone make the
assign the
motion?
dates of.
You just did.
Okay. I'll make that motion then. Thank you.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. Moving on to Senior Citizens Advisory Board.
Who's the commissioner on the board?
Yeah, we got another
We
meeting.
haven't established that.
We haven't established that. Would we like to
I
establish that
think
this
Paul
evening?
wants it. Paul, would you like to be there, Commissioner?
Are you advocating for?
I would like to
I would
nominate myself.
like to put a motion to recommend Commissioner Beaumont.
And as a Navy, I will
Veterans
second that as a
Advisory
Navy man.
Despite my intuition as an Army guy. I'm sorry.
He has a term
I'll back up. I would like to recommend Commissioner Beaumont to the Veterans Advisory Board.
And I'll second that.
as ex officio.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. Moving on to Senior Citizens Advisory Board.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to recommend Betty Fairchild to be added to the senior board to replace my outgoing person. She is with the Sheriff's Department, and one of the good things about that, I think it helps incorporate several departments, one being the fact that crimes occur against our senior citizens, and she's in the know and the ability to work with our Sheriff's Department to help them become no victims and as safe as they can be.
I'll second that motion.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. Any other board appointments? Moving on to consent agenda.
Motion for approval.
Second.
Any discussion?
I wanted to ask the county manager about the Currituck County Agricultural Development Plan. What would be the purpose of us accepting the plan and explain it? I know we've had a discussion on it before.
Yes, ma'am. As you, I guess it was several months ago, this is a work product that came out of a grant that Mount Olive College had received. They were working with the rural counties throughout the state to help develop agriculture development plans. They came several months ago and presented a plan for Currituck County as a presentation. They recontacted me, and as a condition for them to fulfill, to get the 100% drawdown of the grant, they need some documentation that the board has actually accepted or adopted the plan, and they asked that we put this on the consent agenda. You are not at this time, there's nothing in the plan that you are specifically committed or locked into guaranteeing to do. I think there's 6 recommendations, but each one of those recommendations would take a formal action of the board to create or to do an additional action to actually implement those. So by accepting the plan, although you are acknowledging the information that's in it, at this stage you're really not committing yourself to do anything specific. And I hope that answered your questions.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. Moving on to County Manager's report.
Nothing tonight, thank you.
Thank you, sir. With that, I will call for a motion to adjourn the regular meeting of the Board of Commissioners. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, motion passed unanimously. I will now open the special meeting of the Tourism Development Authority and hand it over to Mr. Scanlon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You have 2 budget amendments for your consideration tonight. The first one is to provide funds in support of the pumping operation the county undertook several weeks ago for the rain and flooding events we had. The second one, I'm going to ask the director to make sure I've got this correct. There is a supply line item that 2 different departments spend out of. Tourism being one and Public Works, and I believe they're asking to divide that line item into 2 pieces so that it just helps them better manage their side of it, so they're both just not spending out of the same line item. So this is actually taking a supply line item and breaking it into 2 pieces. And with that, I'll be happy to answer questions you might have.
Any questions for the director or Mr. Scanlon? With that, open the floor for a motion.
Motion for approval for the 2 budget amendments.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. We'll now call for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, motion passed unanimously. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for a great meeting.